Camille Johnson always knew the corporate world wasn't going to be easy, especially for a black woman working at QuantumTech Innovations, a major tech company based in San Francisco. Her talent and dedication stood out, but they also made her a target for prejudice. She was used to the side glances and whispered conversations that seemed to follow her every move. But her biggest challenge came in the form of Robert Harris, her boss, who from day one made it clear that he didn't believe she belonged in that environment. Harris never missed a chance to throw out snide comments about her appearance or to imply she would never fit in with the company's culture. Camille, though, was determined to succeed. She swallowed her pride, held her head high, and consistently delivered exceptional work. No matter what Harris did, she refused to let his negativity define her. What no one knew was that Camille was on the verge of a major life-changing moment. After years of hard work and overcoming endless challenges, she had caught the eye of the company's board of directors. Headquartered out of state, they had been quietly monitoring her progress and decided she would become QuantumTech's next CEO. The decision was groundbreaking. Camille would be one of the youngest and the first black woman to ever hold such a position at the company. The entire process had been kept secret, strategically so, to see how certain key figures like Harris would react to the coming changes. Completely unaware of the tidal wave of change approaching, Harris continued his campaign of undermining Camille. He belittled her work in front of others and often made racist comments disguised as jokes. Despite the daily grind of his oppressive behavior, Camille endured it all, knowing her time was coming. That morning, as the office buzzed with activity preparing for a major product launch, Camille could sense that the breaking point was near. She had led the charge on this project, putting in countless hours, sacrificing her weekends, and pouring her heart into ensuring every detail was perfect. Harris, however, refused to acknowledge her efforts. In fact, her success seemed to threaten him, and he doubled down on his attempts to undermine her. When Camille entered the conference room that day for a critical presentation, Harris was already seated, glaring at her with his usual disdain. The room was filled with executives and staff, eagerly awaiting her report. "Do you really think you're ready for this, Camille?" Harris sneered, leaning back in his chair. "This is a big project. I can't afford to let you mess this up." The room fell silent, and her colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, too intimidated to intervene. Camille, however, kept her composure. She had been here before, but this time felt different. Deep down, she knew that soon, everything was about to change. "I'm more than ready," she responded firmly, standing tall as she began her presentation. Her voice was confident, and her mastery over the project shone through with every word. No matter how many times Harris tried to interrupt or throw her off balance, Camille remained focused. But Harris wasn't done. After the presentation ended, he abruptly stood up, knocking his chair back in frustration. "Enough of this," he snapped, his voice laced with barely controlled rage. "You don't belong here, Camille. You never have. You're fired." The air grew heavy with shock. Camille felt the weight of the injustice, but she remained silent, letting the moment sink in. Her colleagues stared at her, their faces a mix of fear and sympathy. Camille knew, however, that she didn't need to fight this battle, at least not today. With a calm smile, Camille stood, gathered her belongings, and left the room without another word. She knew that while Harris thought he had won, the real game had just begun. On her way home, Camille's emotions were a whirlwind. The firing was a blow, but there was an odd sense of calm mixed in. Harris had no idea what was coming. By this time tomorrow, his world would be turned upside down. Her new position as CEO would be announced, and his downfall would be swift and unavoidable. Later that evening, Camille received a call from Thomas Whitfield, the president of QuantumTech's board of directors, one of the few who knew of her imminent promotion. He checked in on her, and when Camille told him about the incident, she expected shock. Instead, Whitfield chuckled. "We had a feeling he'd pull something like this," he said reassuringly. "That's why your appointment is going to be so important." The next morning, Camille walked into the company headquarters with her head held high. She had been summoned to a meeting with the board and top executives, a meeting that would change the company forever. Harris, of course, had no idea and was likely still celebrating his victory. As she entered the boardroom, Harris was already seated at the head of the table, brimming with arrogance. The board president began speaking, outlining the company's recent achievements and challenges. There was a dramatic pause before he announced the major change in leadership. "It is with great pleasure," Whitfield declared, "that I announce Camille Johnson as the new CEO of QuantumTech Innovations." The room fell into stunned silence. Harris froze, his face a picture of disbelief. "This has to be some kind of joke," he muttered, standing up as if to protest. Camille rose from her seat. "No, Mr. Harris," she said firmly, her gaze locked on his. "This is no mistake. The real mistake is something else, but we'll address that shortly." Harris looked around the room, desperately searching for support, but all he saw were neutral, unsympathetic faces. His confidence began to crumble. Whitfield continued, "There is one more matter to address. Mr. Harris's behavior over the years has been unacceptable. Numerous complaints have been filed against him, citing racist comments and creating a hostile work environment. As CEO, Ms. Johnson will now take responsibility for these issues." Harris's eyes widened in panic. "You can't do this to me. I've been here for years," he shouted. Camille's voice remained calm but resolute. "What you've done, Mr. Harris, is to damage this company's reputation and its people. And that ends today." With a single gesture, Harris's dismissal was formalized. He was escorted out, his world collapsing before his eyes. The power he had wielded so ruthlessly was gone, and for the first time, he had no control over his fate. In the months that followed, Camille led a complete transformation at QuantumTech. She introduced rigorous diversity and inclusion initiatives, creating spaces where employees could voice their concerns without fear. The toxic environment Harris had cultivated was replaced with one of collaboration and respect. Under Camille's leadership, the company thrived, and the employees, finally feeling valued, worked with renewed energy. As for Harris, his reputation was shattered. He tried to rebuild his career, but his name had become synonymous with discrimination and abuse of power. Camille, on the other hand, became a symbol of resilience and leadership. Her story featured in business magazines, and she was invited to speak at conferences about diversity, inclusive leadership, and the power of integrity. Reflecting on her journey, Camille knew that the battle was far from over. Leading a company like QuantumTech came with immense challenges, but she had proven one thing: real power comes from respect, justice, and the courage to stand up in the face of adversity. And now, she was ready for whatever came next.